Before I even entered the kitchen, I could hear the murmur of voices. They were soft and relaxed, as if the speakers had been chatting for some time. This place was supposed to be a peaceful retreat. That's how he had described it when I first arrived. He had offered me the guest rooms for as long as I needed, making it seem like a simple, uncomplicated gesture. But now, something felt different. The air was filled with the scent of freshly baked goods, and a soft melody played from a speaker on the counter, blending into the background. I walked into the room, still adjusting my sleeves. 3 people were gathered around the kitchen island. Him and 2 others I didn't immediately recognize. One of them looked somewhat familiar, while the other was completely unfamiliar. They all turned slightly as they heard my footsteps, mid-laughter. He glanced at me first and gave a casual nod, accompanied by a small, relaxed smile. "Hey," he said, "you're awake." I nodded back quietly, still getting my bearings, my eyes moving between the others, who both offered friendly glances as if we had already met. He stepped forward and handed me a mug. "I made extra," he said. It was coffee, still warm, and I took it gratefully, though I was still a bit uncertain about the situation. The room felt more lived in than it had the night before, with chairs pulled slightly away from the table and everyone standing comfortably. The front door was open a few inches, letting in the morning light and a gentle breeze. I didn't ask who the visitors were or how long they would be staying, and no one rushed to explain. For the moment, that seemed enough. The house was quiet again. Dinner dishes were rinsed but left out to dry. A single lamp lit the living room, casting a soft golden glow across the walls, like a reminder not to turn everything off at once. He had offered to set up the guest room again, but I shook my head before really thinking about it. "I'll stay out here," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" I nodded. "It's fine. It feels more honest." He didn't question it, just unfolded a blanket across the couch and disappeared down the hall. I tried to settle in, but the silence was thick and familiar in the way quiet can be when it's been around too long. It wasn't uncomfortable, just too complete. Eventually, I stood and made my way toward the back of the house. His bedroom door was slightly open. I knocked lightly as I stepped closer. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, half dressed, flipping through a book that looked like it had been left mid-page. "You okay?" he asked, not startled, just restless, I said. He didn't move, but set the book aside, listening. The pause between us wasn't cold, just unspoken. "I'm not trying to interrupt," I added. "I just didn't want to be alone with my thoughts right now." He nodded. "You can sit if you want." I stepped in and took a spot near the foot of the bed, angled away slightly, hands folded in my lap. The room was quiet, lit only by the small lamp beside him. It wasn't tense, just quiet. We didn't speak for a while, and there was nothing we needed to fill the moment with. Eventually, I lay back gently on the comforter, staring at the ceiling. The air between us wasn't heavy, just still. Something shifted in the pause between sentences, though I couldn't pinpoint what. Maybe it was just the way time slows down when no one's asking for anything. I didn't expect to feel this calm I said. He gave a small, almost invisible nod. It's been a long week. That was all. We didn't move, and we didn't explain. For the first time in a while, it didn't feel like anything was waiting to happen. It just felt like a night that had finally gotten quiet enough to hold. The morning felt quieter than the night before, not empty, just settled, like the house had taken a deep breath and let it out slowly. I found him sitting on the back steps with a mug in his hand. The sky was still a shade of early gray, and the light coming through the trees was soft enough to make everything seem further away. He didn't say anything when I joined him, just shifted slightly to make room beside him. I sat down. We didn't look at each other, just watched the yard stretch into the distance. You seemed comfortable last night, he said eventually, his voice easy. I gave a small nod. It was quiet. I needed that. He looked down at his cup, turning it once in his hands before speaking again. Some friends are stopping by this evening, he said. It won't be loud, just a few people catching up. I turned toward him slightly. Are you hosting? More like letting them gather here for a bit, he replied. Happens now and then. Not a big deal. I hesitated. Do you want me out of the way? He shook his head. You're welcome to stay. It's your space, too. I didn't say anything right away. I wasn't sure what I felt, just that the thought of new voices in the house made something stir. Not nervousness, just uncertainty. They know someone's here? I asked. He nodded. Not specifics, just that the place isn't empty. I took another sip of coffee. It had cooled, but I kept the cup in my hands anyway. There's no pressure, he added. If you want to say hello, you can. If not, no one will take it personally. I glanced over at him. So, what kind of gathering is it? He shrugged lightly. Just a few people who like to reconnect now and then. Sometimes we share stories. Sometimes we just sit around. I let the words settle. I'll think about it, I said. He stood, stretched his shoulders slightly, and gave a small nod. Whatever you choose is fine. Just wanted to let you know. I stayed on the steps a little longer after he left, and somehow that felt like enough. The next evening, I took a little more time getting ready, not for any particular reason, just to feel a bit more like myself again. I wore something simple, a navy dress I'd packed but hadn't reached for yet. It wasn't flashy, but the way it fit made it feel like a quiet decision I was finally ready to make. Familiar, but slightly more intentional. I brushed out my hair, still damp from the shower, and added a bit of mascara and lip balm. Nothing dramatic, just a way to mark the shift from one part of the day to another. Even with my reflection staring back at me, something felt slightly off-kilter. Not wrong, just like I was standing a little closer to something I hadn't fully named yet. From the hallway behind me, his voice came quietly. They're on their way. I nodded to the mirror and adjusted the sleeves of my dress. Friends? I asked, still facing forward. He stood at the doorframe and leaned gently against it. Yeah, people I've known a long time. Nothing formal, just a visit. I turned slightly toward him. Do they know I'm here? They know someone's staying, he said. That's all. There was no tension in his voice, no weight, just a casual explanation. I'm not sure what to expect, I said. He gave a small nod. You don't have to decide anything right now. Just meet them, that's all. A knock came, then 3 soft taps on the front door. He didn't move, just glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. "Whenever you're ready," he said. I stood there for a moment, steadying my breath, not because I was nervous, just thoughtful. Then I stepped into the hallway and walked toward the door. At the entryway, I paused, adjusted my posture, and opened it. 2 men stood there, one tall, wearing a wool coat, the other slightly younger, with kind eyes and a relaxed posture. They offered small nods and greetings, polite and unhurried. "Evening," one of them said with a quiet smile. There was no fanfare, no surprise, just a simple, respectful start. They stepped into the house quietly, not rushed, not cautious, just steady, like people used to arriving without fanfare. I didn't speak, neither did they. One of them set his coat over the back of a chair, brushing a bit of lint from the sleeve. The other glanced along the bookshelf, scanning the titles the way someone does when they're not in a hurry. No one looked at me right away, not out of avoidance, just giving space. When they finally turned, I was still standing by the hallway, cup in hand. The air between us felt still, not heavy, not charged, just unspoken. "I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do," I said. One of them met my eyes. "You don't have to do anything," he replied, calm and certain. That landed differently than I expected. Not as permission, not as dismissal, just clarity. I nodded once, more to myself than to them. I moved closer, not for any reason, but to be part of the moment. The distance between us shortened naturally, like the room itself was pulling everything toward a center. One of them gestured toward the sofa. "Sit if you'd like." I did. The seat was warm from the nearby fire, and the quiet around us held steady. The second man pulled a chair closer, but didn't sit right away. He stood near the edge of the light, taking in the scene, not analyzing, just present. For a while, no one tried to lead the conversation. There wasn't one. It felt less like something beginning and more like something that had already started without anyone realizing, like walking into a room and realizing it had been waiting for you to notice it. At some point, someone said something simple. I don't even remember what, but it was enough to shift the silence from still to shared. I leaned back a little and let myself breathe more deeply. No expectations, no roles, no pressure to define what this was. Just the comfort of being allowed to sit in a space where no one needed me to explain anything. That was enough, not because it changed anything, but because it didn't ask me to. She didn't plan for this. She didn't expect it. And maybe that's what made it matter. The cool metal on my wrist had felt like a promise that morning. A delicate silver chain intertwined to form an infinity symbol, clasping a single shimmering sapphire. "Happy anniversary, my love," Daniel had murmured, his lips brushing my ear as he fastened it. I'd smiled, genuinely touched by the elegant simplicity of his gift. It was understated, classic, and felt meaningful. I wore it all day, the smooth stone a constant, comforting weight against my skin. The beauty of the bracelet held my attention for a while, a stark contrast to what I was about to discover on his phone. Later that evening, curled on the sofa while Daniel scrolled through his phone, a flicker of movement on the screen caught my eye. It was an old photo, the grainy quality instantly recognizable. A woman was laughing, her hand thrown back in carefree abandon. And there, glinting on her wrist, was my bracelet, the infinity symbol, the sapphire, identical. My breath hitched. A cold dread, sharp and swift, pierced through the warm contentment of the day. I leaned closer, feigning casual curiosity. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice betraying none of the sudden turmoil within. Daniel glanced up, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes before he smiled easily. "Oh, just an old colleague from the London office." We were reminiscing about a project. He tapped the screen, dismissing the image with a practiced flick of his thumb, but the image was burned into my mind. The angle, the lighting, it wasn't a casual office snapshot. It was intimate, personal, and the bracelet, the inscription, a tiny "Forever Yours" engraved on the clasp, a detail I'd cherished as uniquely ours, mocked me with its silent testimony. This wasn't a forgotten trinket. This was a deliberate act, a recycled sentiment. I was wearing a ghost of his past, a tangible reminder that I was, perhaps, just another chapter in his well-worn book of romance. The quiet disgust that settled in my stomach was a heavy, unwelcome guest. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was a chilling realization, a stark clarity that stripped away the carefully constructed illusion of our life together. I was part of his routine, a comfortable placeholder who wouldn't notice, wouldn't care enough to look beneath the surface. He had underestimated me terribly. The smile I offered him felt brittle, foreign on my face. "That's nice," I said, my gaze fixed on the sapphire on my wrist. It no longer felt like a promise. It felt like a brand. The next day, while Daniel was at work, the quiet hum of my calculating mind began to orchestrate a different kind of forever. The next morning, the weight of the sapphire on my wrist felt different, no longer a symbol of affection. It was a cold, hard piece of evidence, a key, perhaps, to unlocking the truth behind Daniel's carefully constructed facade. The quiet disgust of the previous night had begun to crystallize into something sharper, more purposeful. Hurt was a weakness I couldn't afford. Clarity was power. My mind, once clouded with the comfortable fog of routine and trust, now felt strangely lucid. The image of that other woman, her hand adorned with my anniversary gift, played on a loop behind my eyes. Who was she? How long had this been going on? The questions weren't born of desperate longing for answers, but of a cold, calculating need to understand the full extent of his deception. The chosen path was clear. Collaborate with an unexpected ally, his ex. The thought had a certain poetic justice to it. She had known him before me, had likely seen glimpses of the man I was only now beginning to recognize. There was strength in numbers, a potential for a more comprehensive dismantling of his lies if we worked together. Finding her wasn't difficult. A quick search through old social media profiles yielded a recent photo. Her name was Elise. A wave of something akin to empathy washed over me as I looked at her smiling face. She'd likely been on the receiving end of Daniel's charm, his empty promises. Perhaps she too had worn that bracelet, believing it held a unique significance. Taking a deep breath, I composed a message. Simple, direct. "My name is Clara. I'm Daniel's wife. I think we need to talk." I attached the grainy photo from his phone. Then I waited. The reply came a few hours later, short and to the point. Yes, we do. A time and a neutral location were suggested. As I confirmed, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The hurt was still there, a cold ember beneath the surface, but it was being overshadowed by a burgeoning sense of control. This wasn't just about my pain anymore. It was about unveiling the truth, about making him see the consequences of his careless deceit. The game had changed. Daniel might think he was clever, juggling his affections, but he had just inadvertently brought his past and present crashing together. And I intended to be there for the spectacular fallout. Our meeting with Elise felt surreal, a quiet summit between two women unknowingly connected by the same careless man. Over lukewarm coffee, we pieced together the timeline, the overlaps in his affections, the casual lies that had become his second language. She had received the bracelet 2 years prior on their anniversary with the same whispered promises of forever. The inscription, she confessed, had made her feel uniquely cherished. The quiet disgust I had felt intensified, morphing into a cold, shared understanding. The week that followed was a blur of hushed phone calls and exchanged messages. We became meticulous, comparing notes, corroborating stories, gathering digital breadcrumbs of his duplicity, screenshots of late-night messages, inconsistencies in his travel logs, shared acquaintances who had unknowingly witnessed his double life. Each piece of evidence solidified the picture of a man who had built his world on a foundation of lies, while Elise focused on her end, discreetly reaching out to mutual friends, letting slip carefully curated details of his past indiscretions, dates, names, and vague but suggestive scenarios. I began my own subtle maneuvers. I spoke casually to Daniel about a long overdue decluttering of old files on his computer, planting the seed that I might stumble upon something. I mentioned running into an old colleague of his from the London office, feigning a vague recollection of Elise's name. Each carefully placed word was a tiny pinprick in his carefully inflated ego, a subtle tremor beneath his confident surface. The tension in our apartment became a tangible thing, a silent undercurrent in our strained conversations. He seemed oblivious, perhaps mistaking my quiet demeanor for lingering hurt, a wound that would eventually scab over. He couldn't have been more wrong. Beneath the surface, a carefully constructed plan was taking shape, each element clicking into place with cold precision. By the weekend, the pieces were set. Elise had gathered enough anecdotal evidence to paint a clear picture of his serial infidelity within his social circle. I had discovered a folder on his laptop filled with photos and messages that mirrored her experiences, including the original purchase receipt for the bracelet, a receipt clearly dated years before our anniversary. The stage was set. The actors were in place. All that remained was the final act. A quiet, almost anticlimactic message was exchanged between Elise and me. Ready? Her reply was immediate, more than ready. The following Monday, the carefully laid trap would spring shut. His phone was a symphony of disaster. Voicemails, unanswered calls, frantic texts. Each buzz was a tiny earthquake, shaking the foundations of his world. I watched the digital tremors from a distance, a cold, detached observer. His carefully constructed reality was crumbling, and I was holding the hammer. A text from Elise. He just lost the Henderson account. Apparently, they don't appreciate their business partner being a serial philanderer. A small smile played on my lips. The ripples were spreading. His voicemails ranged from pleading to angry to desperate, a rapid descent into self-pity. I deleted the messages without a second thought. I packed a small bag, the essentials for a few days. My apartment no longer felt like home. It was a stage, a crime scene, a testament to his lies. I left the bracelet on the dresser, a silent, glittering accusation. The final act played out with a chilling simplicity. A colleague, a mutual acquaintance, mentioned to Daniel, "I saw Clara having lunch with Elise today. Funny coincidence, huh?" The color drained from his face. The realization hit him like a physical blow. It wasn't just me. It was us. The two women he had thought were disposable, interchangeable, had joined forces. The women he had underestimated had become his reckoning. I imagined the scene, the dawning horror in his eyes, the sickening lurch in his stomach as he connected the dots. The phone calls, the whispers, the missing clients, the averted gazes. He wasn't just losing me. He was losing everything. His reputation, his social standing, his carefully curated life, all reduced to ashes by the combined force of two women he had deceived. I closed my eyes, a wave of cold satisfaction washing over me. It wasn't triumph exactly. It was closure, a sense of having righted a wrong, of having reclaimed my dignity. The hurt was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was finally being overshadowed by a profound sense of peace. Game over.